I was that woman. I just really wanted to experience submission in any way that I could.
Why do you want this so much in this area? Why is it so important to you?
And that's where things go wrong.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm David Chambers. I'm your host. I'm a dating, relationship, and intimacy coach for men. I specialize in really helping men step into their kind of healthy masculinity and then channeling that in those areas of dating, relationship, and intimacy. That's really what I specialize in, because many men have just not been taught how to use our healthy masculinity in a way that is good for us and good for the world. And I guess this links into this episode as well about, being more dominant, being a better dom, where I'm joined by the wonderful guest, Sara Butcher, who is a BDSM coach and kink educator, and she'll tell you that as well. But this is a powerful episode because this isn't a topic that I'd say is my expertise at all. Hence why I've got a wonderful guest who is an absolute expert in this area. And we get into a lot of stuff about being more dominant, being a better dom, being a more conscious dominant, like how to communicate as a dom, how to communicate command, right? And the subtleties in going from having bad commands, right, that no one wants to listen to having powerful commands that your sub wants to listen to, wants to submit to and surrender to you. We talk a lot about the misconceptions around dominance and being a dom, because, and being domineering. We also talk about the difference between being dominant and being domineering, which is a really important distinction that she brings to the conversation. We talk about the mistakes that people make, particularly men make, when it comes to being dominant. But we also talk about some of the mistakes that subs make actually in the dynamic as well. We talk about the key traits that you need to embody, you need to enact, you need to be a really excellent dom. That's really something that I took away a lot from, actually, for myself and my own sex life, and also about how to be a more confident dom. How can you have the confidence to be more dominant? It's all contained in here. Like this episode, man, could be like 5 episodes. And then we also talk about how healing the dynamic of dom and sub can be. We go into the details about this. I've had someone on my podcast that actually talked about this, I think at the end a while ago, about how, the sub-dom dynamic really helped her and helped her feel sexually empowered after experiencing sexual trauma. And then we kind of finish up by talking about how, BDSM can really be used for shadow work and allow us to embody parts of our shadow that maybe we normally would suppress, and it allow you to bring that out. So there's a lot in this episode, especially, if you're interested in being dom, you're listening to this episode. But I guess before we jump in, I'll say, if this is a topic that you're interested in, but also you can see that there's areas of your life where maybe you're not stepping into a kind of healthy masculinity that allows you to be confident, allows you to be outgoing, allows you to communicate well. Maybe you're a bit avoidant of communication. Maybe you're making lots of assumptions in your dating life, making up lots of stories about how people are and living out those stories. And this means you're not getting the dating life and the relationship you want. Then get in contact and we can have a talk about how I can help you with that. But without further ado, I'll let you get into the episode. So, listeners, back for another wonderful guest, someone I've known for a while, actually. I've been very aware of her work and followed her and championed her because we are still part of brand ambassadors for Taylor Match, the company that I have seen grown very intimately in many different ways. And today I'm joined by Sara Butcher. How are you doing, Sara?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. Been a bit, strangely, the funniest thing I'm going to say now is that my knees really hurt. And that's because I've spent 2.5 hours cross-legged in a couples coaching session, as I mentioned before. And it's meant that my knees hurt. And I almost thought about doing this podcast standing up, which I didn't do. And I'm glad I didn't, because I'll get tired. So I'm good though, other than that.
I thought about doing that too, actually, because I've got this new standing desk that I've not tried out yet. But yeah, I thought the same. I'm too lazy.
Is it one of the you press a button and it goes?
Yeah, it's a little cranker one. You wind it up.
Oh, nice. Oh, you're fancier than me. Mine's literally a special made cardboard box that I can put on top of my desk and have my keyboard in one place and laptop on the other shelf. All right, so the listeners are probably wondering about our desk setups and so forth. Not my usual start, but as is customary, I always like to ask guests to introduce themselves, what it is what they do. What is it? What magic do you do, Sara?
What magic do I do? Okay, so I am a BDSM coach and kink educator, and often people say to me, how the hell did you manage to end up doing that? Didn't even realize that was a real job. And I guess I got here because when I was first starting out exploring my kinks, there really wasn't much around in terms of education or someone that I could go to for mentorship to know that what I was doing was the right thing. The internet can be a very dark and scary place. And I just felt like there was a real gap there for some good sex education, because we all know that the sex education we had in school was not very good. So yeah, my goal really is to empower people to consciously explore what BDSM means to them, because there is no one size fits all when it comes to your kinks. And I wanted to show people that it is okay to talk about this stuff, to explore it, and to feel confident to do that safely as well.
Beautiful. And I think I may have been to one of your workshops a while ago. Actually, I definitely think I dropped in with Orsa. Must have been a year or so ago, and really enjoyed it. Very impressed. Because BDSM, just listeners, just so you know, BDSM and kink are not my areas of expertise at all. Actually, it's not something I've delved too heavily into. So I'm also very much looking forward to this conversation to learn.
Excellent. Yeah. So I host a number of different workshops online and in person, and I also do one-to-one and couples coaching as well. So if you want something a bit more tailored to your needs, then yeah, I just work with people to really help them create that safe space to talk about sex and BDSM and kink and all of the good stuff that comes with that.
Wonderful. And let's get some definitions actually sorted, just for anyone who's arrived and they're not quite sure what these acronyms and words mean. What does BDSM stand for, to start with?
So BDSM stands for bondage, dominance, sadism, and masochism. And in hearing that, it sounds quite scary. There's a lot of things in there that stereotypically we think of those things immediately when we think of BDSM. But actually, in exploring BDSM, you might not be into bondage, dominance, sadism, or masochism at all. There can be many other things. It's more of an umbrella term that houses a number of different kinks. So while the acronym has four different kinks, four, there are many others that you can branch out into as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think when we think of BDSM, we always think of I'm trying to think of it, like leather and like whips and gimp suits and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that's sort of the first image that people get in their minds. But and they think it's all about pain and degradation and humiliation. And actually, BDSM can be very sensual, very slow, very romantic. It really depends on the individual. So yeah, hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But it really isn't what we see on the surface or what we see in the movies, 50 Shades of Grey, all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. And it's not just all about that sort of pain inflicting things.
I'm thinking of there's a film with Bruce Willis in it, isn't there? And he finds himself locked up. So I feel like I'm thinking, you know what? Pulp Fiction. Do you remember Pulp Fiction? And he ends up with a guy called Z. I always remember the Z. So I think when we think of BDSM, we think of that. But it's like you said, it's not always the case. I'm lucky enough. I went to Torture Gardens many years ago, and Kit Kat Club actually even more recently. Well, that was still like 7 or 8 years ago. And just to observe people was fascinating, actually, because you have these preconceived ideas of like what BDSM is. Because some of those words like sadism and masochism, and like and dominance. You're like, whoa, wait a minute, these are like hard words. They feel like hard words, they feel like aggressive words. That's the thing. When actually, and you see people, and there's a lot of care and attention and what's the word I'm looking for? Care, attention, love, and kind of deliberateness. That's
intention. Yeah, it's all done with intention. I think that is the main thing. If I could, if anyone could take anything away from this today, is that everything that is done within BDSM is done with intention. There is a reason behind it. We're not just, anyone can kind of play around with a spank, a choke, or a hair pull. But to really experience BDSM and the full pleasure that you can get from it, there needs to be intention behind it and a reason as to why you're doing it.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, exactly. There's a reason. It's not just to be cruel and mean. I think that's something that even for myself, that there's been a resistance to like, oh, I'm a gentle person. Like, I don't want to inflict pain on anybody.
Yes. And that's such a common thing that I hear. Oh, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to push them too far. Or does it make me a misogynist if I want to do these things to women? What's wrong with me? And I always say that actually, if you are questioning that and if you're saying those things, then I already know that you're not that person, because there's already thought behind it. You're already being intentional and knowing that you're not a horrible person, but you have certain desires and you're thinking about those. So already you're being conscious in your desires. And that's what it's really about. If you're doing it unintentionally and just going around slapping people without consent, of course, then that's not okay. But I think consent, communication, and intention are the sort of 3 core pillars of BDSM and kink to make sure that you're doing it in the safest, most pleasurable way.
Got it. Yeah. It's about care for the people. And I guess it's it's like all areas of sex, really. Those are often the most important things that we not necessarily overlook, but maybe we get lost in the technical pieces, like I see this with men I work with in dating, or even when I'm talking about sex and intimacy, is they're like, how do I do this thing and do that thing and try this thing? And I want to do this thing. And you're like, wait, like let's start with conversation. How can you talk about the thing that you want? And then they look at me like, but what do you mean? Can't I just do the thing? No, you have to talk about it. That's what mature adults do. We talk about stuff and make sure we check in with each other to make sure, is that something you want? How would you like that? And all those sorts of things. And it doesn't surprise me, but there was also that look of terror and shock when they have to realize that the thing they want to do, they have to be able to talk about first before they can do it.
Yes. And actually, when I teach my BDSM 101 class, I think some people are often surprised that I don't talk, they don't see any toys. We don't talk about actually any activities. What we're really doing is talking about, okay, what kind of things are you into? How can you communicate that? How can you negotiate that with your partner? Understanding your why. Why do you like this? It's about asking questions and being really curious, first of all. So actually, I don't introduce anyone to any toys or anything until much later down the line.
Mm-hmm. Nice. That's important. That you can just have a conversation about the things we enjoy. So I want to jump into, because the question that I get asked quite a bit by men, and it's not just, we'll probably dig into why is it that men like to ask this question more than anyone else, is around dominance and wanting to be more dominant in the bedroom. So I'm out of interest, and for some clarification, is like, what's the definition of dominance inside the umbrella of BDSM? What's the meaning there?
So with dominance, you normally have dominant and submissive roles. Okay, so one person is the dominant, one person is the submissive. The dominant is the person who essentially is leading the activity or the scene. So when I say scene, I mean the play or the sex or whatever it is that you're doing together. The dominant person is leading that. And then the submissive is following. They are letting them lead the activity and sort of perhaps give the commands or choose the activity that you're doing. And I often refer to dominance and submission in terms of energy as well, that the dominant is very much the masculine energy and the submissive is the feminine. And just for those who are listening, I'm not referring to gender here necessarily. I'm talking about the masculine energy is leading the scene. They're this healthy, confident leader, and the submissive is really surrendering into this slowness, which can be really beautiful, particularly for people who in their everyday life are very dominant and are very much in their masculine, which is why I am myself submissive, because in my everyday life, I'm very dominant. I'm running my own business. And actually for me to submit, it's very much about letting go of all of those choices that I have to make and letting someone else make the decisions. So the dominant is there to really empower the submissive or the other person to really sink into that space. So yeah, they're leading that in a healthy way to empower the other person.
I love how you put it into the energies of the masculine and the feminine. And anyone who's listened to my podcast for a while will know that I often talk about this, as you put it, the masculine, the leading, the one in taking action, moving things forward is an energy, and the feminine is receiving, is receptive to all this and the flow of what's happening and surrendering and so forth. And it's a beautiful way to kind of sink back into, especially as you said, like if we're not used to that role in our lives, maybe as you put yourself, a business owner, kind of the maybe not the stereotypical, but we will often think of the kind of stereotypical high-powered woman, in life, she's bossing it in every level, she's on the board, she's doing her thing, and then when she goes home, she really is looking for a way to kind of step into her feminine and looking for a partner who can guide her there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where like the stereotypes come in quite a lot, that people assume that if you're very dominant in your everyday life, that you would be dominant in the bedroom. But actually it's quite the opposite, because you're wanting that opposing experience. A lot of people assume that I'm the dominant one when they meet me and my partner at workshops or events. They assume that I'm the dominant, because actually when I'm out in the everyday world, I'm the one who's very masculine and my partner's very much in their feminine. They're very in touch with that. So, but actually it's the complete opposite when we're behind closed doors, because we like to step into those different roles.
Have to switch it up. And I guess the question for you, well, it's not for me because I'm going to ask the question. Why do you think it is in particular? And I obviously I'm going to be really honest, I have my own theories about this thing. Why is it that so many men, they have this idea of like wanting to be dominant in the bedroom, like really, wanting to be dominant in the bedroom? Is it kind of linked to how they feel about their masculinity and how much they are maybe dominant in their own lives? why so many men are always, the question being like, how do I be more dominant? How do I be more dominant? Is there a particular reason that you see or you've experienced why men are always kind of looking towards this question, looking for an answer to this eternal question?
Yeah, it does seem that a lot of men have this question. And I mean, my question back is always, is that what your partner wants, or is it just what you want? I think there is this sort of feeling, this expectation, or perhaps a pressure that men feel that they should want to or need to be dominant in the bedroom, which of course is not true. You don't have to be. And there's also a kind of expectation or assumption that means that you need to be physically overpowering your partner, when actually it's not just about the physical at all. So I think, there is also a desire in the taboo around overpowering a woman, that it does feel wrong. And that is why we like it. This is why we call them kinks, because these are things outside of the mainstream, that we're kind of not meant to do in everyday life, but there's this desire to do it because it feels wrong. And it goes the same for women who want to be dominated. I get that question a lot from women. Does that make me a bad feminist if I want a man to overpower me? Absolutely not, because this is all about choice, right? It's all about how we choose to use our bodies and experience things with another person. It's consent, it's choice. So yeah, there is a stereotype, and perhaps people men assuming that they need to be this way. But that's not necessarily always the case. There is a lot more behind it than just the physical.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's this idea as men that we're kind of socialized into. We should be in that position of dominance, that position of leadership, right? Even in the bedroom, and then not really actually feeling they're so kind of entrenched in the idea of how they should be being based on how society has schooled them. They're not necessarily actually checking in to say, wait, is this something that I actually want to do? Because I imagine that a lot of men, and I'm putting my hand up here as a man, like to be submissive and just be receiving, to be to be able to follow is such a beautiful experience, And for me, someone who, I guess in my whole life, I'm making decisions, I'm organizing shit all the time, I'm making shit happen. Like when I get in the bedroom, I want to fucking lie back. I just want to lie back and have my woman, my woman also, I'm like, do what you want,
yeah.
kind of thing, And obviously we're kind of super central in most of what we do. But it's a beautiful experience. And I think a lot of men are kind of almost restricting their ability for range based on societies and their own ideas of what and how they should be being.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And I think there's this constant conflict that I hear from men about, okay, so society is telling me that I should be more dominant, but also I shouldn't be more dominant because that's misogynistic or that's not fair to women. And then on the other hand, I hear them saying, well, I'd quite like to be submissive, but men shouldn't be submissive because that's not what we're supposed to be. But actually I should be. So there's like this constant back and forth, I think, that I hear from men quite often, is that they're constantly battling with what they should be doing rather than, as you say, tapping into how they actually want to experience things.
How they want to be. Yeah. That's a really good point. I think that's not just in the bedroom, right? That's something I experienced as a coach across the board, that inner conflict that men experience. And I know it's the same for women based on, talking to Orsa, that we have this inner conflict of what the world wants from us or expects us to be versus what we want and what we desire and what we'd like to try. And it's just, we're always kind of in that battle, aren't we? Of that dance of, okay, what do I want? What does the world expect from me? Which of them do I get to choose? And I guess, I'm sure listeners, you know me well enough by now. I'm like, choose what you want. Like, fuck the world.
Yeah.
Like whatever that world wants from you, if you're not interested in it, then don't bother. Especially these ideas and ideals around masculinity and being a man and being dominant. you know, I found personally there's a number of men that I've met who, and I'm not going to say this is a stereotype because I haven't worked for enough men to say this is true or not, that they lack the control and power in their own lives, and they crave to be dominant somewhere. And they've kind of come across BDSM and been like, this is a place that I can do this. And I often wonder with them, and I've proposed with them, like, hey, like, why do you want this so much in this area? Why is it so important to you?
Okay, interesting that you say that the way that they wanted it to go, because I think that's another thing, is that we think of dominance as, you know, one person is dominant and they are sort of deciding what that dominance looks like. But actually, when there is dominance, there is always submission as well. There is always the other side of it. And that really is a co-creation and a power exchange. It's not just one person exerting power over another.
Yeah, I think this is
this exchange of power. So there has to be two people's
domineering, and you know, I hear it, and what
opinions
I hear is like
in there around what that dominance looks like, and that would be the first thing that I would encourage people who are considering exploring their dominant side is to ask yourself and to ask your partners, what does dominance mean to them? What is your definition of that?
The thing we've seen in society for eons, and particularly, let's be honest, around men, is just taking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's just not considering that there is another person or other people within that scene or that play or that relationship. You've got to build that dynamic and feed off of each other. And actually, by the same token, I think this is where there is a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation that the dominant immediately should know how to be dominant and what to do. And actually, the other person, the other partner, the submissive partner really does have a responsibility to communicate their needs to the dominant. Otherwise, how can they know how to dominate you? They can't. The dominants are not these magical mind-reading creatures. But I think often people sometimes expect that.
Yeah. And I guess that's, again, feeding into a kind of a narrative, isn't it? It's funny because I was speaking to a couple that was working with around couples coaching, and we talked about how with relationships, you know, we can often be that sense that, I should know how to do this, and especially men. I can reference men because I work with so many of them. Is like they feel like they should know how to do everything. So in this case, it's being a dom. It's like, you're a man, you're a dom. It's like, I should know how to do everything. I should just know what the other person wants to be a good dom, which is the same when we look at it from a point of view of sex. Often men feel that they should know how to do sex, right? And do it well without ever having to communicate anything with their partner. And I know I'm talking in very heterosexual terms here, and I always do because that's what most of my clients are. So, and then I guess you get subs that come into a dynamic of like, they don't really know how to communicate, and they don't really want to communicate, maybe even. They just find themselves being like, I want to surrender, and I don't know what that means, but let me find a dom who knows everything and can be dominant, and I can just be a sub and I can just surrender back. And I guess that's where we end up into like some really, really terrible situations, because both people are kind of mentally entrapped in these ideas of how I should be as a dom and how I should be as a sub. And they want to avoid the very, maybe the most important thing, which is communication. Yeah.
And yeah, it's funny because I was that woman, when I first started out on my journey, I just really wanted to experience submission in any way that I could. And I was very set in my ways that I only wanted to speak to experienced dominance, whatever that means. At the time, I think I thought an experienced dominant who knows what they're doing, they can just come in and dominate me without any questions asked. And I refused to speak to anyone else. I really narrowed down this pool of people for myself, because if I met someone who perhaps was interested in exploring dominance, but they didn't have any experience of it previously, I would completely write them off. And this is one of the biggest lessons that I learned throughout my own journey, because that was so naive of me to think that. And now I can say that the definition of an experienced dom is not how many subs they've had in the past, or whether they know how to spank or know how to tie rope. That's not an experienced dominant. An experienced dominant is someone who has the emotional intelligence and the self-awareness and the patience to really get to know you and your desires, to ask the right questions. And if that's what it is, then actually anyone out there listening to this who would like to explore their dominant side, you have every potential to be an experienced dominant, as long as you are willing to learn. That's ultimately what it comes down to. If you're willing to really understand your own desires and your partner's desires and take the time to do that, this isn't a quick process to becoming a super amazing dom. It is a learning process, and your kinks are constantly evolving and changing over time. So the things I experienced with doms 10 years ago are completely different to the things I experience with my own partner now. Like the dominance is completely different. And so I think it's really important to know that to be a good dom, that knowledge is power. You need to gather as much information as you can, and that's what will make you a good dom.
Mm. And I want to, and what I'm really hearing you say, it isn't necessarily knowledge of other people, it's gathering knowledge of the person that you're with in this moment.
Yeah, exactly. So
yes. And I think it's really interesting there that what you said is like, it's like emotional intelligence, awareness, communication, and a willingness to learn, right? These kind of building blocks to being good dom, because I imagine, there's so many misconceptions. We could probably talk for 2 hours about misconceptions, but these things here, like, those are the building blocks of like good employees. They're the building blocks of like someone who's great to be in relationship with, like good friendship, like, these are like the words that I'm using constantly with people, like, oh, you want to have a better dating life, emotional intelligence, like awareness, a willingness to admit that you don't know things and you can be curious about someone and understand things and communicate well. Like, it's the building blocks of so much of our lives generally, right?
Yeah.
And, I guess for the listeners, I'm reiterating this, is like, these are, as you said, these are the building blocks for being a good dom as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where we can learn so much from kink, because this process within the BDSM world is very commonplace. Like it's just very natural for anyone within the BDSM world to talk about sex before sex, during and after. We like to talk about it all the time. There's that constant cycle of communication. And so you kind of have to get very comfortable very quickly in talking about what you like if you're wanting to experience your kinks to their fullest.
And when you see that people aren't able to say what it is that they like or that they want, is there any kind of indicator of what the kind of problem is for them when that kind of comes up?
Yeah, so I hear this a lot from people that they don't know what they're into, or what I often hear is that they say they don't have any limits, which can be a real red flag. If you're going out and meeting people and telling them you have no limits, then that's one of the top things I say. That's a big red flag if you're meeting a potential dominant and they say that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have any limits. It's sometimes because they don't know what their limits are. And that can get misconstrued in communication. So it's really important that you own that. If you don't know what it is that you want or would like to experience, then owning that is going to make you a better dom than saying, oh, well, I don't have any limits, I'll try anything, because then that's really opening yourself up for things to go wrong. But I think that the reason why people can't communicate what they want, or they don't know what they want, is because, well, the main things I think are shame, fear of judgment, again, back to these kind of stereotypes that they feel that it's wrong to want to do those things, particularly to women, that they feel that they're going to get it wrong. They're scared of being embarrassed by not knowing what to say or how to act, or that it won't feel natural. It's a fear of performing, I suppose, is one of the main things, which I guess is probably what we hear from men a lot in sex in general, that there is this fear, like, to do well and to perform well. Like, it's this narrative again that men have to know exactly what to do every moment, and it should go so smoothly. It should look like it does in the porn or in the movies, and that's just not reality.
Yeah. And it's interesting, it's the word performance. And I talk about this piece a lot, because a performer is like someone who's on stage, right? And there's a crowd watching their performance, right? And there's this idea from men, it's like they're being observed, they're being critiqued and watched the whole time in their make-believe performance of sex, when actually, as you've mentioned before, we don't always remember that it's a co-creation, that two people are coming together, two or more people are coming together to create a scene or a sexual experience, and which makes them all responsible for the creation of the experience, not just the man who's doing the performance or doing the doing.
Yeah.
For you. Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely that. Because I hear a lot from men who want to be dominant, that they feel that they can't ask their partner if they're, how they're feeling, or, the whole idea of checking in and checking that they're not pushing the boundaries. I get asked so often, well, how do I do that without breaking the atmosphere and then it just kind of killing the vibe? But actually, it doesn't kill the vibe. It can really enhance the vibe to be checking in with your partner and asking them how they're feeling and how that's making them feel, because you are taking control there. You're taking the initiative to ask them, and they do have a responsibility to give you an answer back, because again, you're not a mind reader. And I guess, there are ways of doing that keep it sexy and that can keep you in that dominant character, I suppose. If you're worried that you're going to kind of feel like you've broken out of this dominant role by asking them if they're okay, I think that people forget that dominants are also caregivers. They have a duty of care to their partner. It's not just about thrashing them to death with a paddle and not asking them if they're okay. You want them to be enjoying it too. That's part of the pleasure that the dominant receives, is seeing how their submissive is experiencing that.
Yeah. And I love how you put it there. It's like, there's a way to do it. There's a way to ask the question in a way that stays, the only words I can use is like stay in character, right? You don't suddenly, go from telling your sub where to move, what to do, in a very commanding, strong voice, and then go, oh, but sub, are you okay? Are you okay, sub? It doesn't have to be like that. You can stay in the character and ask the question.
Exactly that. And actually there can be something really powerful in asking your partner to talk you through or tell you how they're feeling. When I'm doing this to you right now, how is that making you feel? And if, say, for example, the purpose of that, whatever it is you're doing, is to make the submissive feel degraded or humiliated, to actually have to voice that you're feeling that way can add to that to that feeling even more. And that can also really then empower the dominant to feel even stronger and more powerful in that moment.
And then it also, in that moment, it kind of causes, and I almost use the word force, but it causes the sub to have to not just be consciously feeling the feeling, not just like, oh, I'm feeling degraded, and like, you know, we have a general bodily feel of it, but actually then to say it out loud, because for a lot of people to say it out loud, that's another level of really expression, of acknowledgement, of feeling, and even turn on for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we do shy away from talking out loud about how we're feeling, particularly with sex. So I am aware that, you know, I talk about words and the power of your voice being one of the greatest tools you can have as a dominant. But of course there is an element of having to build up the confidence to get there, to be able to really stand in your power and use your words and your voice in that way. So one way that I encourage people to start out with this is, you know, use the art of command, you know, literally just telling your partner what to do, but you don't have to do that out loud necessarily. You might want to send them a text or even send voice notes. I find can be a great way to start to build up that confidence in speaking to your partner, giving them those commands. And also that builds up anticipation. So anticipation is about 80% of BDSM, I would say. Like the build up is really key to creating the feeling that you want to create. So it's a win-win to practice the build-up and the anticipation, but also to gain confidence in delivering those commands or saying how you feel without having to necessarily be face-to-face with that person.
Wonderful, beautiful. And, you know, we're starting to surface, get to like what makes a good dom. And, you know, you already said the kind of the emotional awareness, general awareness, communication, willingness to learn. And now you've added in there the power of words and tone.
Yeah.
What are some of the other elements of being a kind of, I want to say, quote unquote, good dom?
So, of course, there are many different physical things that you could do to actually be dominant. But I think, yeah, the power of the words, because I say that, you know, to be a good dominant, all you need is a firm hand and a stern look. So I would say another really important factor is eye contact or lack of eye contact. So let's give an example. So asking your submissive to kneel in a particular position, maybe at your feet or on the bed, whilst maintaining eye contact with them and telling them that they should not look away unless they are told that they can, that creates a very intense connection between the two of you. That can create a very intense feeling. Or vice versa. You can tell your submissive that they are not allowed to look at you. And actually, in taking away those eye contact permissions, you are perhaps evoking a feeling of humiliation or degradation or feeling less than. So the use of how you use eye contact with another person can be so powerful as well. And combine that with words, that's all you need. That really is all you need to really command a room and command your sub to get into that subspace, to feel like they're wanting to surrender to you.
It's like a strength of intention as well behind it all, isn't it? There's a feeling I'm getting from you is like, you know, the power of words and the eye contact, the power of command. But behind that is kind of the strength of the intention behind it. Maybe I wouldn't use the word confidence, but actually the strength of the intention, because, you know, one can ask someone to kneel down very meekly, right? And that doesn't really land as like dominant, but actually when there's a strength of intention behind it, then our kind of system is like, oh, I'm being told what to do here. I need to submit to this.
Yeah. And I think the dominant really has to believe in what they're saying. They have to have the belief that the submissive is willing to follow them. Because if you You can talk about things, but if you don't believe that your submissive is willing to or is going to enjoy following your commands, then you're probably not going to say it with enough conviction. That's why the communication piece is also so important, so that you can understand and set the parameters of what feels good to do or to talk about. And then once you know those things, you can have this little bank saved. I always tell dominants to have this little bank of things that they can draw upon. So you're not required to be spontaneous all of the time. And that doesn't mean that you're going to take all of the fun out of it. But in order to have, this little pool of things that you can draw upon, you're going to feel much more confident in knowing that this is something that they are likely going to be receptive to. And therefore you'll say it with more confidence. And tone and context really is everything. So it is so important that you have full belief that they will follow what you're going to ask them to do.
Mm-hmm. I guess this maps back into the communication piece in the kind of the onset. Like if you've had a conversation about what they want, what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, how they want it, and so forth, you're gonna have filled up your bank with all these assets. So then in the moment when you are in the moment of command, you're going to feel confident in what you're saying because you've already done the kind of the groundwork, the kind of curious work to find out about this person and what they desire, what they want, so that when you do deliver it, there's confidence there, opposed to if you've done no communication at the beginning and you've just kind of like fallen into a scene and you're just kind of acting out what you're guessing they might want or what you want. You're always going to be kind of speaking from a place of like, it won't be a command. It's going to be a question, because there's still part of your mind that's like, oh, are they going to want to do this? I'm not really sure. And that's going to have a massive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I get asked a lot of questions about spontaneity and, does everything have to be spontaneous? And it really doesn't. While spontaneous scenes and play is absolutely great and fun, really taking the time to maybe schedule or plan in the scenes is, one, going to take a lot of pressure off of you. Two, is going to make you feel way more confident. And three, it's also going to really strengthen your commitment. If you're looking to really build on this persona and build this role and build this dynamic with someone, then you do have to kind of be consistent with it, rather than just doing it sporadically and kind of thinking, oh, maybe they'll like this. So yeah, those three things are really, really important to helping build your confidence and find your own unique style of dominance as well, because again, there is no one size fits all. There is no one type of dominant. And again, this is something that happens within the world of BDSM, that people think that they should be a certain type of dominant, when actually there is, you could meet 10 couples that are in dominant and submissive relationships or dynamics, and none of them would be the same. None of them. Because everyone has their own unique way of doing things.
Again, we have this idea of how we should be that gets in the way of us allowing for our own unique and kind of authentic way of expressing our own dominance, or even, our own surrender even.
Yeah, for sure. I think so yeah, I think it's about really just stripping back everything we think we know, because there is so much out there that tells us, okay, dominance should be this and dominance should be that. I really just recommend forgetting everything you've probably ever seen or learned before, and really leading with your intuition and what feels good, because ultimately this is about creating experiences that feel good. If it feels forced, if it feels like you're putting on an act, or you feel like you're in a character and it doesn't feel natural, then that's probably not right for you. This isn't about creating picture perfect scenes like we see in the movies or in porn. It's natural. You're supposed to laugh with it as well. You don't have to be so serious all the time because you're the dominant. If you get something wrong, laugh about it and own your mistakes. and check in with each other. It should be fun. It shouldn't necessarily just be very serious faced all the time and strict. You don't have to be that way.
I'm imagining someone with a paddle and they're missing their partner's bum and being like, oh my God, I'm such a terrible dom. I can't even use my paddle. And then they're like standing there, like in their mind, beating themselves up about it. And then their partner's kind of lying there, like waiting, like, well, what happened there? That missed. That didn't hit me. Like, how did they miss? But not wanting to admit it, not wanting to laugh, and it all being super awkward.
Yeah. And like, the thing is, that happens so often. So it's better to laugh about it, and really that will bring you closer together as well, because also part of being dominant and exploring that side of you is you're creating a deeper connection with your partner. That ultimately is what this is about. It can really bring about lots more intimacy, lots more closeness and connection with your partner. And also the other thing is that you can ask your partner what they want as well in the scene. If you're not really sure where to go next or what to do, again, own it. Ask your partner, like, how are you feeling? What would you like me to do to you now? Or like, how are you going to serve me now? The dominant doesn't have to be the one coming up with the ideas all of the time, because we all have creative blocks sometimes, and it can feel quite exhausting to be the one to always be coming up with the ideas. So why not tell your partner, again, using the art of command, ask them to plan the scene or plan what you're going to do that evening. So you don't have to take all of the responsibility all of the time. You can definitely delegate that to your submissive and still do it in a very dominant way.
And just really getting from conversation so far, it's like, it's not always about what you're doing, right? That's where we get lost. That's where people get lost when it comes to dominance. It's like they think it's all about the what, the what, the kind of externally expressed movements and so forth. But it's actually, what I'm getting from you is it's a lot more about how you do what you're doing.
Yes, for sure. Like I said, you don't need to have loads of toys, a big toy box, a big dungeon. You don't need to have any of that stuff. And actually what I teach people in my BDSM scene building workshop is that so often when we think about what we want to do with our partner, we go immediately to the toys and we create something around that object. When in actual fact, if you take that out of the equation, because you're actually really limiting what you can do there, you go back to, okay, how do you want to feel in that scene? And then once you've decided how you both want to feel, then you focus on, okay, what tone and what mood will create that feeling? How can we start to evoke that feeling through how we're talking to one another, or, our immediate environment where we are? And then toys come in absolutely last. They should just be an accessory, a prop that you can use to add even more excitement to the scene. But actually, you shouldn't need those at all. It should be mainly focusing on how you can make your partner feel that the way they want to feel, and how you can evoke the feeling that you want as well.
And just because I don't know in this context what they mean, when you say tone and mood, what do you mean by that?
So tone could be, the tone of voice, the way that you're speaking. So let's say, for example, the feeling that the submissive wants to feel is maybe scared, powerless, degraded. So perhaps you say, okay, what tone can I take on that will make them feel that way? Perhaps it's a strict tone. Perhaps it's a very forceful tone. And then the mood is thinking about everything else around you other than the toys, because often, again, while spontaneity is great, often we forget about everything else around us and all of the other senses that we have that can make us feel a certain way. So we're talking smells, taste, texture. You might want to put candles or incense out. Perhaps you want them to wear something specific or wear nothing at all. what can you see? What can you hear? The music, the ambience. It's creating. It really is creating a scene. Again, it is like a performance, but also a not a high pressure one in terms of, you're not. It doesn't have to be picture perfect, but taking the time to consciously prepare the environment beforehand can also be a great part of foreplay and a great part of that anticipation as well. So, for example, the dominant might ask the submissive to set up the room. So perhaps lay out the tools that they're going to use, or spend some time choosing what they're going to wear, lighting the candles, choosing the music. And in doing that, they can also get an idea of perhaps what's to come. And it just, allows you to take into account all of your senses and everything else around you, other than, okay, let's do a punishment scene. I'm going to grab the paddle and I'm going to spank you. That's like end of it. There's so much more that you can take the time to consider, and it will make a huge difference. Even just taking yourself out of one environment and putting yourself into a different one, maybe moving from the bedroom to, you know what, no one's in the house, we're going to do it in the kitchen tonight. It just, that change of environment can completely change the context of the scene.
It's like what comes to me, it's like it's artistry, it's an art to building all these little bits and pieces and using all of the senses to completely fashion a mood and a tone and a sense and a feeling from everything that's there. But there's also a sense that, like, what you were talking, and I thought of spontaneous versus responsive desire. So for some people, the building of the room is incredible for them because it starts to get them into the thinking and the feeling of what's going to come later on. That actually is maybe as important to them as the scene playing out. So building the scene is as important to them as being in the scene and it playing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where people forget that BDSM scenes or play, whatever it is you're doing, it's not linear. It doesn't just go from A to B. And I think, we all know already that it should definitely, at the very least, be A, B, C, so we're starting the scene, we're reaching the peak, and then we're delivering aftercare, which is really important. But actually in between those 3 points, there are many others as well. So you might want to build up some anticipation, then pull back a bit. You might want to change up the sensations, deliver contrasting sensations, and then reach the peak. And then slowly come down by introducing something new again entirely. And then finally getting to the sort of aftercare and the debrief, and the cycle starts again. So there's many different points to consider other than just bish, bash, bosh, let's do this.
It reminds me of... I studied Tantra for quite a while, and there's like, depending what school of Tantra you're going for, there's like 7+ stages to tantric sex. And there's just coming together, there's feeling each other, there's, the way I was taught, one of them is like feeling the energy of the beginning and moving into foreplay, and then the main play, and then aftercare and so forth. Afterwards, some people even practice yoga. And it's like, there is this arc. And it's not just like straight to the point, not straight in there. And all the other stages along the way actually support the, should we say, main piece in the middle. And it's these things that are often forgotten when it comes to creating a really incredible and beautiful experience.
Yeah. And I think it's also important for dominants to know that, that peak doesn't necessarily have to mean orgasm, right? We're also, the scene that you're doing might not even involve sex at all. There are many ways that we can play around with our dominance, both inside and outside of the bedroom, depending on what kind of experience you want. Because for some people, it is purely a bedroom thing and it does involve sex. But for others, exploring dominance and submission can mean many other things. There is a way to find this space for both of you where you want to be in that dominant energy and you want to be in that submissive energy, and perhaps that doesn't always involve sex. And that's not for everyone. Some people don't like to take it out into the real world. But again, it's about doing what feels right for you, and exploring and pushing your boundaries at a pace that feels good for you.
And what are some of the ways that people take the dom sub dynamic out of the bedroom and into the real world?
So again, with taking it outside of the bedroom, you have to really talk about those limits, because we're all human beings. We all have busy lives. And, for example, when you're at work at the office, that might be a place that's completely off limits. You don't want to have to be answering to your dominant when you're trying to take a work call. But for some people, that's also quite sexy. They go to the bathroom and take a cheeky photo for their partner and send it to them. For some people, that's great. For other people, it's an absolute hard no. So again, talk about your parameters there. But taking it outside of the bedroom doesn't mean that you're going to let your partner control you in everyday life. And it's not like they're going to be telling you to clean the house, do the dishes, unless that's your kink, because for some people it can be. But it's just about taking those roles and allowing you to remain in that mindset, perhaps in a non-sexual setting. So whether that be the way that you speak to each other over the phone or over text, you're referring to your dominant by the honorific, so by the name or the title that they want to be called, or in private, in semi-private public areas, you might want to step into those roles very briefly. It could be telling your partner what underwear to wear that day, or asking them to wait for you by the door when you get home from work, on their knees. These little acts of service, I suppose, that show your dominant or show your submissive that you're in that kinky space, and that you're remembering where your role is and what your place is. And that can be really, again, a really nice way to build up that anticipation when you do take it into the bedroom.
Wonderful. That's a wonderfully educational piece there. So I think that's something that, as you said, people think that if you take outside of the bedroom, it becomes like a no limits game. But actually you enter once again into the conversation around limits and boundaries and consent, and where it's okay and where it's not okay, and so forth. And that, again, the boundaries often allows us to create that sense of safety, that sense of excitement.
And also, I think one thing that, again, dominants think is that they can't safe word, or that they shouldn't have their limits, when actually dominants have just as every right to say no, as the submissive does. So if there's ever a point in your journey, whether it's inside or outside of the bedroom, where you just know that your head's not in it, it really is your responsibility and duty of care to yourself and your partner to say, actually, you know what, I'm just really not in that headspace right now. And also for your partner to know that is okay, and to not take that personally, because we are only human, and dominants might not want to be in that dominant energy all of the time, because it can be exhausting. So what I would say is, do make sure that you're practicing self-care and not feeling like you're pushing yourself to your limits because your submissive wants something in that moment. It goes both ways. Again, it comes back to that power exchange that you have. You can step out of that whenever you want to.
Yeah. I guess it comes down to the communication, feeling that you can just say what it is that you need in those moments and what you want, and have that heard and listened to.
Absolutely.
And you touched on aftercare a little bit, and, I think it'd be great to kind of just speak a little about what aftercare is and why it's so important for people.
Yeah. So I mean, aftercare is something I think that should be practiced in every sense, when you're having sex, not just with kinky sex. It's the period of time after the play or the scene or the sex where you just take some time to ground yourself back down into reality. So you're stepping out of your dominant and submissive roles and you're stepping back into who you are. And sometimes the scene that you've just done might be quite intense. You might have pushed yourself outside of your comfort zone. You can feel very much in a bubble when you go into those kind of role plays. And so aftercare is not just about providing care for the submissive, but also providing care for yourself and for each other. Just to ground yourself back down to make sure that you're both feeling okay. And that could be done in any way that feels good for you. So for some people, it might be that closeness and that intimacy through hugging or touching. But if you don't have a romantic relationship with your partner, then maybe it's just checking with each other. Maybe it's watching Netflix together, doing something, having a cup of tea, anything to just bring you back down to reality. Often taking a hot bath or shower is quite common, just to kind of really signify the end and the closing of that scene, to really close that space and leave that space there so that it's sort of, you're back into your, what we call the vanilla world, I suppose. But the aftercare is, I would say, is separate to what I also call the debrief. So while checking in and asking your partner if they're okay is part of aftercare, yes, there should also be a sort of an extra period of time after that, which might not be immediately after the scene. So aftercare should be immediately after, but the debrief could happen maybe days or a week later, just to check in and say, okay, how was that for you? Now that you've had time to think about it and reflect on it, were there any things that you really, really enjoyed and you'd like to do again? Were there any things that you'd like to tweak or change? So those two things are really important, but they are separate entities.
Nice. And it's interesting that you talk about the aftercare and debrief, because I've worked with a few men that are in relationship and they're having trouble when it comes to intimacy. And it's actually something that I found for them, for couples that are having issues with their intimacy, is really important, makes a massive, massive difference, is the aftercare and talking about what it is and going, okay, what do you need? Is there anything you need from me? Do you want me to, that sort of thing in the moment, but also the debrief being really important because it builds confidence that, okay, so there was these things that we did well together. That was really good. And I thought I was going to like that, but I didn't really enjoy that. And, I really enjoyed this, but it could have been even better if it was like this. It actually builds a lot of confidence and even connection between two people.
Yeah. And it's a really good way to build your confidence, not just in, getting that feedback from your partner, but in being able to speak out yourself around how it was for you. It takes practice, but it is such an integral part that you shouldn't skip, because it really will help you build your dominant character or your submissive character, again, in a way that is really shaped uniquely to you and really building on that experience for yourself, and will help you to really get the most fulfilling experiences out of it. It can be scary, but again, in the same way that I talk about the art of command, if you want to do your debrief via text message or voice note in the beginning, or if that just feels better for you, then by all means do that. I encourage even couples that live together, if you want to email each other, if that feels more comfortable, do it that way. As long as you are able to have that interaction, then that's a really great start.
So it's much how you do it isn't as important as the fact that you do actually do it.
Yes, because I think for most people, it pushes you outside of your comfort zone, if nothing else. And that's really important that we keep doing that within BDSM and kink, is that we're always pushing those boundaries in a way that feels, a little bit uncomfortable, but safe at the same time.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned safe there. It's something that I've spoken to a few people. One of my actual former coaches had a long career in, I won't say career, but he spent a lot of time in the kink world. And he talked about how healing it was for him, actually, and how transformational it was for him to be in the kink and BDSM world. Is that something you can kind of speak into a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many different people who explore BDSM and kink for lots of different reasons. I mean, on my own personal journey, I've found BDSM and kink to be integral to my own personal development and to gain confidence that I've needed and to really learn who I am as a person. I think it's done wonders and really sort of fast-tracked some of those skills that you can use to really, learn about yourself and know who you are. And there are a lot of people in the space as well who find BDSM and kink to be very cathartic and very healing, perhaps for many other reasons. So I think one of the biggest stereotypes I often hear, and actually when I saw a coach many years ago and I told her about my interest in BDSM and kink, the first question she asked me was I abused as a child? And it shocked me. It really, really shocked me that she asked me that question. And I mean, it's safe to say I didn't go back to see her, but because there is this sort of assumption that everyone that's into BDSM and kink has some kind of trauma, or that there is something going on there. There is a reason why you're into maybe being hurt or spanked or whatever. Now, that's not true for everyone. We all have our own reasons for liking what we do, but there are people within the kink space that who have had previous experiences of trauma, sexual assault, where this is so empowering for them because, again, it's all about the choice, and you are choosing to enter this space where you have control over that situation. You have control over what's going on for you. And I've heard lots of stories, and I've worked with many clients who had these really empowering experiences that have helped them really move on and close the door on perhaps that kind of chapter in their life when they have experienced something terrible or non-consensual. So I think that BDSM and kink really does have the power to be incredibly healing in many different ways for a lot of people, even if it is just, as I say, learning more about who you are as an individual, not just about your desires, but about how to communicate with people and really, diving into like the taboos that you have, and perhaps these parts of you that you're ashamed of or scared of. I think BDSM and kink can be really powerful in that sense.
Yeah, because that's how it was described to me. I never forget one woman I had on the podcast actually, and she was like, it was, as she put it, she was like, it was the best shadow work she'd ever done in her life, because she was able to go to those parts of her that she felt shame about, or she didn't want to go to those emotions, and she was able to build a scene with people or person to allow her to embody that sense, that part of her that she hadn't given space to before, in a way that was safe, in a way that was consensual, in a way that she was able to fully surrender into that part of her, experience it, and then integrate those learnings that she took back into her life. And when it was described to me in that way, I was like, wow, that is an incredibly empowering, I guess I'm using the word activity, because, there's these little parts of us that we feel shame about. Maybe there's part of us that feels helpless sometimes, for instance, right? There's a part of us that feels helpless, and we feel ashamed that we feel helpless. So we always push that away. We also always avoiding any situation where we might feel helpless. Whereas for what I'm getting from you and what I've been told in the past is like, you could build a whole scene around experiencing helplessness, right? In a way that is safe and consensual and so forth. And you get to completely embody that for a period of time, to feel it, to even, let go of some of that emotion, to dissipate that in a way that can allow you to empower you in your life going forward, but also so that when you do experience feelings of powerlessness in your life, they're not accompanied by shame.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful work. I agree. I think that's a great way to put it. The greatest shadow work you've ever done. I would agree with that. I think it's it really helps you to look at those parts of yourself that you perhaps don't want to face or don't want other people to see. And the beautiful thing is that you're able to share that with another person as well, or, and a whole group of people, a whole community of people, because I think the people within the BDSM and kink community are some of the least judgmental, welcoming, open, warm people I have ever met. And what a beautiful place to be able to do that and feel held by so many.
Yeah, I have to agree. Many of the people I've met over the years who have, come to me and said, they're active members in the kink and BDSM community. Wonderful communication, open heart, acceptance. And I put it down to often, it's just like they're accepting of themselves. They've seen things that most people would be shocked at, maybe. Mm-hmm. And they're able to just like see the humanness in everything, the humanness of people, and love them through that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, hopefully for anyone that is listening and has been scared about embracing their dominance, I really hope that sort of, gives you the courage and the confidence to just take a few steps. I mean, it is all about the self-work. I mean, I really highly recommend doing a lot of reflection work. Journaling, I find, is really helpful throughout your kink journey, just to see how much you evolve and change. Like doing this regularly, you'll look back and you'll think what a different person you were in 6 months ago, because things do change so quickly as you grow, as not just as a person, but you grow with your partner. For example, there are things that perhaps I didn't like 10 years ago that now are a regular part of my kink lifestyle, and vice versa. Things that I really loved back then are just not part of it now. But I don't feel sad about that, and I don't feel like I'm missing out, because it's the experience that I'm creating now in the present moment that's most important. So I really recommend just checking in with yourself so regularly to make sure you're keeping it fresh as well, because often we can keep doing the same thing that we thought we liked, and then one day we're like, oh, well, this is a bit boring. And that doesn't mean that it's not for you anymore. You don't have to throw in the towel. It just means it's time to evolve. So go with that flow. Let your intuition lead you.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, wonderful. I'm aware that time is running away, as it all often does. And I'm sure the listeners are very intrigued of where they can hear from you more, whether they can come and work with you one-to-one or as couples as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the best place to get in touch with me is by making sure you're subscribed to my mailing list, as I'm quite often in people's inboxes with lots of exciting offers. But you can find my website, subinthecity.com, as you can work with me one-to-one, either as an individual. You don't have to be in a relationship. We can work together to help you discover your kinks and make a plan for how you want to move forwards with that. Or as a couple, if you're looking to navigate those dominant submissive dynamics, or any other kind of dynamics that you're looking to explore. You can follow me over on Instagram. But I often keep getting taken down by the Instagram police lately. So if you don't find me there, Sub in the City, then mailing list is the best place. But I've got a couple of events coming up in the next few months. So if you're looking to meet the community, meet like-minded people in a very non-judgmental, no pressure space, I am hosting a social event, a summer social event on the 25th of May. So everyone is welcome along to just come along and have some, real connected, kinky conversations, to learn more about yourself and others in the community.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to be putting all those links and so forth. They'll be in the show notes. So if you're wanting to go to any of the events, you should be able to find those and get yourself along. I just want to say a big thank you, Sarah, for today, for so much wisdom and knowledge, and just the breadth and depth of the knowledge that you've shared today.
Oh no, thank you so much for having me. It's been really great, and I think that we could talk about this for hours. But so if you want to learn more, then keep in touch.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, listeners. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to, you could give a rating and review, or you could get in contact with myself or Sarah, talk about what you've learned, what you're taking away, what you can take into your own life as well. Because, we are real people too. We like to hear from you. We do love to talk to actual real people, not just, put words and sounds out into the world. But, until you arrive in our inboxes, I say a big thank you. And I'll see you next week.